Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military with Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 5th of January of 2026. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk once again about massive missile and drone attack that took place during the previous 24 hours. The Russians are saying that during the previous night, during the previous 24 hours between 1 p.m. and 11 p.m. of Moscow times, the Russians managed to bring down around 300 drones that were launched by Ukraine. And the Russians struck back, and during the previous night the Russians were attacking mainly the northeastern part of Ukraine, so lots of explosions were recorded. The pro-Ukrainian sources stated that Russians used a bit less than 200 drones and missiles altogether during the previous night, and as you can see the Russians were attacking mainly the northeastern part of Ukraine, so this one. And this is a very important part of Ukraine because Ukraine used this territory, this northeastern part of Ukraine, as a launching site. Ukraine used this territory to attack deep inside of the territory of the Russian Federation, so that is why the Russians, for example, during the previous days launched an offensive operation in this area. We discussed the situations. Currently something is happening around the villages of Kharkovka and the settlement of Komarovka, so some activity from the Russian side. So as we discussed during the previous videos, the Russians most likely are tasked to cut this northeastern part with the purpose to reduce Ukraine's possibilities to attack deep inside of the territory of the Russian Federation. So the Russians struck back. Ukrainians are saying that they managed to bring down 137 out of 174 air vehicles that the Russians used for this attack, and that's it. But another important thing, that's when this attack finished, the Russians began a new attack, and this time the Russians were concentrated on the city of Dnipro. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of videos of consequences of Russian attacks in this area, lots of explosions, lots of videos published by pro-Ukrainian sources. And here, for example, we can see the moment when the Russians attacked the city of Dnipro with drone, and then there was a very heavy explosion. And as we discussed in the previous videos, the Russians have improved their drones. Now they began using different types of weapons and equipment with the Geranium drones. For example, in this video we can see how Russians managed to install anti-aircraft or anti-helicopter, let's say, launching pod. The drone can use this anti-aircraft weapon if they see a helicopter or another aircraft approaching the drone itself. So this is a very important installation, and obviously during this upcoming 2026 we will see more and more different types of equipment installed to this type of weapon, because we see that this is something like universal type of weapon. The Russians use these drones for reconnaissance purposes, for attack purposes, and now the Russians will also begin using these weapons for, let's say, air defense purposes or anti-aircraft or anti-helicopter purposes as well. Another important thing, another important piece of news is coming from the city of Kiev. During the previous 24 hours, we received complete confirmation that Vasil Maluk was dismissed, and currently we don't know for sure what kind of position he is going to take, but he is a person who was in charge of SBU, of the Secret Service of Ukraine, and he was in charge for many operations that have taken place since the beginning of the special military operation. So once again, I would like to remind you, if you don't know who is Vasily Maluk, I would like to remind you that several months ago Ukraine carried out a special operation by the name of Network, or Spider Network, correct me if I'm wrong. If you remember, when Ukrainians using drones and trucks were attacking the Russia's strategical aviation planes through the entire territory of the Russian Federation, and that operation was prepared and was carried out by these special forces, and Vasily Maluk was in charge of this organization when those attacks were taking place. So, and today he was dismissed. And this is a very important, let's say, political step from the Zelensky side, because now it seems that Zelensky is trying to do something. Just during the previous 3 or 4 weeks, he dismissed 4 important persons. He dismissed Andriy Yermak, the head of the office. Then he changed the position of the former let's say, the former Secretary of Intelligence of Ukraine, Kirill Budanov. He appointed him on the position of the head of the office of the President of Ukraine, and today we received the report that he dismissed Vasil Maluk. So these three persons were involved in most dangerous, most difficult and complicated operations, sabotage operations through the territory of the Russian Federation. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that every single one of them was discovered or was recognized as a terrorist according to the Russian legislation. And now we see that Zelensky, it seems that he's trying to remove every single person who is recognized as a terrorist according to the Russian legislation. It seems that Zelensky is trying to create a completely clear, let's say, top authority of Ukraine, maybe even with the purpose to start negotiation process with the Russian Federation, because we understand that Russians will not negotiate with anybody who is being considered as a terrorist according to the Russian legislation. But if Zelensky changes every single one of them, then of course the process will go much easier. So maybe this is the situation, and this is the process that is currently taking place on the territory of Ukraine, the political process, first of all. I believe that we will understand this sooner or later, but as of now, let's wait and see what is going to be next, because it seems that these people who are being dismissed will not be in a silent. Most likely they will do something, probably with the purpose to strike back the President of Ukraine, Zelensky, as well. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the northern directions, about the Sumy direction. Today the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation confirmed that the group of forces north managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Grabovsky. Based on this report, we haven't adjusted anything because the territory of the village of Grabovsky was colored several days ago when Russians began offensive operation in this area, but just today the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation confirmed this information. Now let's talk about the Kupiansk direction. There are very heavy clashes in this area, and as for in comparison with the previous, let's say, video, with the previous update, we haven't received anything special, just a video from the territory of the village of Kurilovka. We will not, let's take a look at this video. Here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians that were moving in the area of the village of Kurilovka with FPV drones. This video, as you can see, took place in winter, so this is a fresh video. We can say right now that this is a fresh video, and this episode took place right exactly at this point, so we have a proof that indeed the Russians have positions on the territory of Kurilovka. We still don't know the exact status of the territories between the villages of Kurilovka, Kucherevka and Petropavlovka. We are talking about these two territories. I would like to remind you that yesterday the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation stated that the settlement of Podoli was captured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation, but as of now we still haven't received anything that can confirm this. But probably this is the first confirmation that indeed the Russians have positions on the territory of Kurilovka, and maybe this is the exact situation that is currently taking place in this area. Now let's move further. Let's discuss the situation in the Liman direction. During the previous 24 hours, we received huge changes on the ground. So these are the changes between the dates. The Russians improved their positions along the Seversky Donets River. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians began advancing in the direction of the road TO-514 with the purpose most likely to establish physical control over the territory and to outflank Ukrainians on the territory of the settlement of Liman. If Russians establish complete control over the TO-514 road, this will force the Ukrainians to change their logistic and to find a solution and find a way how to get supply and support through the settlements of Sidorova and Mayaki. But the problem is that to get supply through these lines is a very difficult process, because there are no roads that can be used for these purposes, and obviously if Russians can take under control the road TO-514, then they will tighten the news around positions of the armed forces of Ukraine on the territory of the city of Liman, and from this configuration, from this perspective, the distance between edge positions in the area of the city of Liman and Drobyshevo would be already less than 11 kilometers, which is nothing for FPV drones. So the Russians slowly but step by step are tightening the news around the settlement of Liman, which means that the battle for this territory is approaching, a major battle. At the same time, the Russians continue offensive operation towards the settlements of Kriva Luka, Piskunovka, Starodubovka, which are located on the Ukrainian side of the river of Seversky Donets. Most likely Russians are not going to cross the river of Seversky Donets at this, let's say, stage of the offensive operation, but at least they can establish complete FPV drone control over the main lines that go from the city of Slaviansk in the eastern direction. And to do this, first of all, they need to take under control the forest and the territory along the river itself. Furthermore, and at the same time, the Russians continue advancing in the area of Sviatopokrovska. During the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. As of now, we have a very huge gap between the city of Seversk and the settlement of Kriva Luka. We're talking about this gray zone territory. Most likely, in coming days, we will receive first updates, but as of the end of the 5th of January, the heaviest clashes are taking place on the territory of Reznikovka, where the Russians are advancing slowly but step by step. Furthermore, the Russians improved their positions along MO3 roads. As of this territory, they are tasked to maintain the lines and to shorten the distances between the settlements of Pazdyon, Nikiforovka, Fedorovka, Druga, Dibrova, and the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal. This red line is something that the Russians are tasked at the first stage of the special military operation, and most likely they will try to take under complete control this territory within the next 4 or 5 weeks or so. This will allow them to approach the settlement of Raya Alexandrovka from the south. At the same time, Russians most likely will be able to get the river of Seversky Donetsk from the north, and then Russians will establish complete control over these open fields, and they will try to ruin the Ukraine's logistic. Now let's move further. As for the city of Konstantinovka, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything special, just probably a video where we can see how Ukrainians were trying to destroy Russia's FPV drones that were attacking them, but another FPV drone attacked the Ukrainians from behind, and it's something that they didn't expect. So as of now, no clashes on the ground. Maybe there are clashes on the ground, but we haven't received anything for a very long period of time regarding additional progress on the ground or additional attempt to attack the city of Konstantinovka. As for the Dobropolye direction, the most important update is that Ukraine, according to information we have, carried out the counter-offensive operation, and as a result of this counter-attack, the Ukrainians managed to improve their positions in the central part of the settlement of Rodinska and to recapture some positions. And furthermore, pro-Ukrainian sources published this video, and here we can see lots of flags that were raised by Ukraine through the entire central part, and this is a fresh video because there is a snow, so this is the situation, and based on this video we have adjusted the map and we have colored the central part of the city back in Ukraine's favor. We are not saying that the Ukrainians are able to hold their positions there for a very long period of time, but as of now we have what we have. Obviously the Russians will try to counterattack when the weather gets better, and then we'll see what is going to be next. As for the Novopavlovka direction, during the previous 24 hours, we received a video that confirms additional progress on the ground, that Russians during the previous days managed to improve their positions to the north of the settlement of Filia, and that Russians are trying to cut the road between the villages of Ivanovka and Novopavlovka itself. We are talking about this line. This is a very important line. Maybe the Russians from these positions are going to attack and to advance further in the direction of the northern part of the settlement. As for the Zaporozhye direction, we haven't received almost anything, most likely due to the weather, from the eastern Zaporozhye direction, but as for the western Zaporozhye direction, during the previous 24 hours, according to pro-Russian sources, the Russians managed to establish complete control over this dense network of the fortifications and to approach the settlement of Novoyakovlevka. This is very important because the Russians, according to this report, according to pro-Russian sources, managed to establish complete control over the biggest stronghold in this direction. If this information is correct, then the battle for Novoyakovlevka most likely has begun, and this is another proof, another evidence that Russians are planning to move further in the eastern direction through this dense network of the fortifications until they enter the settlement of Novopavlovka and the northwestern part of the city of Orekhov itself. So we can say that today, not just today, probably several days ago, but now we can say for sure that there is a Orekhov offensive operation, and that the Russians continue, and that the Russians are tasked to establish complete control over this territory within the next months. And that's it for today. Military with Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.